Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am V. Selvakumar. I am from Department of Maritime History and Marine Archaeology, Tamil University, Tanjavur. Today we are going to look into the epigraphy part of this lesson. This particular paper is Indian epigraphy. It is part of the subject Indian culture. Under this, there is a module of epigraphy as a source for social, economic and cultural history. So we will be focusing on the importance of epigraphy for understanding social, economic and cultural history. Let us look into the learning objectives. The aim is to understand the various divisions of history such as social history, economic history and cultural history, to know how epigraphical sources are useful for the reconstruction of social history, economic history and cultural history. Our aim is to understand the multiple dimensions of history. Let us look into the types of history, how history is divided into various types. History is divided into political history, economic history, social history, cultural history, environmental history, intellectual history. These are all very much interrelated divisions of history. They should not be seen as islands. History should also be studied holistically, focusing on various processes such as social formation and political economy. These areas also overlap with each other. These branches are very much interrelated. We need not go into the issue of whether these divisions are relevant or irrelevant, but each divisions have their own importance. Each of these divisions has its own importance in understanding the past. That is why scholars have created these divisions, and let's look into the detail. These disciplinary branches exist, and also there are many societies and journals focusing on various components of these historical branches. They do give specific focus and offer frameworks to look into different aspects of history. So these divisions are very important, and then also we have different approaches in history, like Marxist approach, which focuses on socio-economic analysis of class relations and social conflicts based on materialist interpretation of historical development. So these approaches are also important for understanding the history more holistically. Let us look into social history. The Merriam-Webster dictionary mentions social history as it concentrates upon the social, economic and cultural institutions of a people. According to C. Conrad, the term social history refers to a subdiscipline of historical sciences on the one hand, and to a general approach to history that focuses on society at large on the other hand. It deals with the structures of societies and social change, social movements, groups, clashes, conditions of work and ways of life, families, households, local communities, urbanization, mobility, ethnic groups. Therefore, this social history focuses on the multiple dimensions of a society. Noted historian Eric Hobsbawm traces the meaning and definition of social history. He says, at first, it referred to the history of poor and lower classes, and more specifically to the history of the movements of the poor. Later, the term was used to refer to works of a variety of human activities difficult to classify except in such terms as manners, customs, and everyday life. Thirdly, social was used in combination with economic history. He argues that none of these three versions of social history produced a specialized academic field of social history until the 1950s, though at one time the famous Annals of School of Lucien Febvre and Mark Bloch dropped the economic half of its subtitle and proclaimed itself purely social. Here we see several trends in the approaches to the social history. Now it generally refers to all kinds of social components. It incorporates both the elites as well as the subaltern sections of the society. It focuses on various social movements and processes that were going on or going on in history. Next important division is economic history. Economic history focuses on the development of economic activities such as production, distribution and consumption. It focuses on the economic processes. It studies the economic activities such as trade, commerce, merchants and economic institutions. Economic processes are intimately linked with social history and cultural history and political history. We cannot study economic processes independently, but still we can focus on the economic history in order to highlight certain component or divisions of history. Cultural history. Cultural history is another important moment in history. Jacob Burckhardt is considered as the founder of the cultural history tradition. Cultural history is defined in different modes. Cultural history explores the modes of operation and functioning of a culture and its change through history. Cultural history could focus on arts, ways of life, religion, belief system. The focus here is on the importance of epigraphy for cultural history. That is what we will be focusing in this particular lesson. So therefore, these three divisions, social history, economic history and cultural history, they can be understood better by looking at the epigraphical sources carefully. In fact, these three components are more interesting than the political history, which focuses mainly on the king and the administrative system. We get very minute aspects of society, culture and economy by studying these particular aspects, which are also very important for understanding the past history holistically. When we talk about social, economic and cultural aspects of history, we can't see them independently. We will explain this by an example. Let's say we have several inscriptions which talk about the donation made to the temple. In certain temple inscription, a donation is made to the temple for lighting a lamp. Here the belief is involved. People believe something good will happen. They donate. It is part of cultural history. The donation is made in the form of gold and its interest. It is invested and its interest is used for the lighting lamp. So it is obviously an economic activity. The merchant community or the people from the Nagaram, they undertake the responsibility for taking this gold and offering oil for daily performance of puja or for lighting lamp. Similarly, sheep and goat are donated to the temples, and this donated sheep or goat is given to the shepherds who graze them, and then they offer certain amount of ghee for lighting a lamp in the temple. So it's a simple activity related to belief has lot of impact on the economy as well as the cultural spheres of life. That's what we see, that social, economic and cultural aspects are very much interrelated. Inscriptions and social history. Let's see how inscriptions are useful for understanding the social history. The various divisions of society can be studied through the inscriptions. In ancient India, we have divisions such as the Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and Sudras. These divisions are reflected in the inscription apart from the other sources, but inscriptions do offer some clues to these divisions and also various classes of the society. And in addition to that, the clans and groups and godras are also referred to in the inscription. By carefully studying these aspects, we can understand the social composition and social makeup. Brahmadeyams, another important component that we get from the inscription with regard to social history is the land donation to the Brahmins. The land donated to the Brahmins was called Brahmadeyams. Kaudilya recommends land grants to the Brahmanas. The land grants were given to various Brahmanas by the kings and also other people. Dharmasastras mention that the Brahmanas should be exempted from land taxes. The earliest grant of land to the Brahmins is dating back to the Pallava times. The Maidavalu and Hiragadalli copper plates mention about the land grants. The lands were cultivated by various other groups. In many cases, Brahmins were acting as the owners of the land, but the actual tillers were the non-Brahmin groups. So a lot of dynamics were happening in India because of the land grants to the Brahmins. In a sense, scholars have argued that it led to a kind of feudal system in certain parts of India. There are several inscriptions across India for the land donation to the Brahmins. The Pulanguruchi inscription in Tamil Nadu, it records about the land donated to the Brahmins. Edilpur copper plate inscription of Bengal, dated in 1079 AD, it also refers to the land donation, actually donation of 3 villages to Ishwara Deva Sharma during the 3rd year of Keshav Sen. So we get several land donation all across India. They somehow reveal a pattern, change in the land production and also change in the social formation as well as political organization. These donation of land to the Brahmins made a lot of changes in Indian history. Brahmins were the carriers of Sanskrit culture, and you can see the influence of Sanskrit culture and cultural elements all across India. We can, in a sense, attribute this to the land donation to the Brahmins. Apart from the kings, individuals also had made land grants to the Brahmanas. We get a lot of evidence with regard to that. Whenever a king donates the land, it is not necessary that the king donated the land. It could have been sponsored by other than the king also. Some scholars have argued along these lines. In most cases, we don't get the minute details why a particular land grant was made to a Brahmin on a specific occasion. As already I pointed out, these land donation encouraged Brahmins to move different parts of India, and that it had a lot of impact on the social makeup of this particular country. Yeah. In addition to the Brahmin migration, the local rulers were also encouraging Brahmins to come and settle in different areas, and they were offering them a lot of lands and other donations. And the next category that we have in the traditional hierarchy is Kshatriyas. We can see all across India the kings were adopting the titles Varman, and in the case of Pallavas and also in the case of Cholas, we can see the title Varman used frequently. But the Pallavas claimed themselves to be from Bharadwaja Gotras. Similarly, the Pandyas and others also claimed certain either solar or lunar rays according to the traditional account or traditional beliefs. So you can see these kind of ideas getting injected into the royal lineages, and this Brahmin migration was one of the important factor leading to the dissemination of this Itigasa and Puranic lineage among many of these ruling class. That was one of the important factor for legitimization of kingship. This was very common in the early medieval period, and people also moved upward in social scale. You can see people adopting various gotras. For example, Guptas adopted Brahmana Gotras. So by adopting these titles and Gotras, people felt they were moving upward in the social scale. And this was one of the important social processes that was going on in the early period. In addition to the ruling class and Brahmanas, we also get a lot of reference to Vaishyas, who were the merchant class, who were also very important in the transactions across the country, and they were very much important for the commercial transaction, and some of them moved out of India and were involved in trade activities overseas, and you get their inscription also at many places. Then we also get references to the workers who contributed to the agrarian development, and here we have taken the case of Tanjavur Bragadishwara temple inscriptions, which in very great detail document various quarters of a particular settlement, and they frequently mention about the number of Paraicheris or settlement of the Parayars, who were mainly the working class, and their distribution is very clear. They are found in many of the villages. Out of these 40 villages for which we have data from the Bragadishwara temples, 22 of them have the Parayar settlements, Paraicheris, and they were serving as laborers in the agrarian fields. So this is a very important information that we get from these inscriptions. So by carefully scrutinizing these inscriptions, we can reconstruct the social history and the frequency of various groups. Social dimensions are also can be gleaned from the land donation. Noboru Karashima has analyzed the land transaction in the villages of Allur and Isana Mangalam, and one is Allur is a Vellan Vahai or agrarian settlement. Ishana Mangalam was a Brahmin settlement. He noticed changes, different kind of land holding pattern, and he argued that Ishana Mangalam, the Brahmadeya village, had individual holding of land. In the case of Allur, which is a Vellan Vahai, the land holding was common. So he noticed a clear pattern from the distribution of the inscriptions. This also reflects the nature of land holding in different villages across South India. The same data is also corroborated by the research undertaken by Professor Y. Subrayulu. So the land holdings, it reflects a kind of social pattern, and these kind of information can be culled by critically analyzing the inscription. In addition to these agrarian as well as the workers, we also get references to the fisher folk in the inscription. There is an inscription near Tiruvarur in the Chola country at a place called Tirukolili. It is dated to the time of Rajaraja III in 1220 CE. It mentions about some fishermen. They beg, there is a person called Alan who personally begged and collected 2100 kasu, and then he created an image, he installed an image of Adipatha Nayanar, one of the saints. This saint is considered to have come from the fisherman community. He establishes this particular image in this temple. So we also get references to the activities of various communities such as potters and blacksmith and washermen. So many other communities are represented in the inscription. That is why studying social history using inscription becomes very interesting, because it exposes the various aspects of the society. Hunters, even there are inscriptional references to hunters. Kannappa Nayanar is one of the Shaiva saints, one of the 63 Saiva saints, and there is an inscription referring to Kannappa Nayanar, and this particular inscription is found in North Arcot district, and here some of the hunters claim that they are the descendants of Kannappa. So you get the multiple dimensions of the society from these inscriptions. Some of these inscriptions are found in remote areas, but they offer very valuable information about the local society and community. Inscriptions are also important for understanding the economic history, and like agriculture, cultivation of crops, their yield, taxation method, measurement methods like weights and volume, irrigation activities, merchant guild activities are also exposed through the inscription. We also have evidence for ceramic trade in the Indian Ocean. We have this particular inscription on a pottery referring to a name of a person, Nandai Kiran. It was found in Oman. We have another inscription found in Egypt at Qusair al-Qadim. It reads Panay Ori, name of a trader. This is another ship's bell which records a Muslim name. It was found near New Zealand. It refers to a person called Muhyiddin Wakus, and it mentions that it is a bell from the ship of this person. It is datable to 13th or 14th century. It was found in New Zealand. It shows that the maritime activities of the traders in the medieval period. This is another Singhala Prakrit inscription on a pottery. It was found in Adagankulam. It refers to the presence of Sri Lankan merchants or traders in Indian coast in the early centuries of the Common Era. This is another inscription found in Quanzhou in China. It refers to the temple constructed by a person from India for an emperor, and this is another important evidence for the overseas activities of the Indians. In addition to that, we also get a lot of reference to the irrigation system, how irrigation tanks were constructed, tanks were repaired, and sluices were created, and we get numerous inscriptions for this particular irrigation activities. And this is a sluice inscription found in Tamil Nadu. You get a lot of such sluices with inscription. They tell about the expansion of agricultural activities. This is another important inscription found on the highway, which refers to a highway called Magadesan Peruvadi. Interestingly, it has certain cup marks which suggest the distance in terms of traditional measurement. We also get a lot of weights and volume measures in the inscriptions. We can correlate those references with the actual seeds and also volume measures. This particular volume measure called Sembian Madhavi Marakal was found in Nagapattinam, and we get references to these in many of the inscriptions. What do you see in this particular table is the measurement rods distribution. We get a lot of reference to measurement rods in the temple inscriptions, and they are found all over, and these measurements rods or yardsticks, they are also marked on the temple with the plus marks, and we can correlate that particular measurement rods and their length with the reference in the inscription, and also that they are marked on the walls of the temples or rocks. And then we can also actually measure the land, try to understand how people were measuring the land and calculating the area. This is another important research in terms of economic history. And we also get a lot of references to various ornaments in the inscription that were donated to the temples by various people. Interestingly, some of the inscription, especially those from Brigadishwara temple, they give accurate detail of the weight of the various ornaments, weight of the pearl, weight of the diamond. So by comparing these traditional measures, and we can estimate how much did they weigh. So this is another important aspect of this research on the economic history, and also it forms part of cultural history. So we have a lot of ornaments listed here, and their weight is mentioned in the inscription that you see in the form of a chart available. By studying their distribution, we can understand the weight of that particular ornament. We also get different land measures and also area measures like Kuri or Veli, and they are also defined in the inscription according to the measurement rod, and they are also very useful for understanding the ancient measurement system. These are the different measurement rods that are found in different parts of Tamil Nadu, and their weight and their length varies from few centimeters to several meters. This is a measurement rod. It is found in Kanjipuram Varadaraja Perumal temple. It is called Tachamuram. It was used probably by the architects or carpenters in the medieval period. This is another important inscription. This particular graph displays the distribution of merchant guild inscription and their peak. If you look at the graph, you can see between 800 and 900 there are only 5 inscriptions, and they reach a peak between 11th and 12th and 13th centuries. This can help us to understand the merchant guild activities, why there was a peak. This can be explained by plotting the numbers or their distribution. We can understand the merchant guild activities. This data derives from Karashima's work. Cultural history and inscription. Cultural history is much more interesting. It refers to the multiple dimensions of human culture. We get a lot of reference to the cultural activities and their belief system, way of life, religion, and everything is displayed in the information from the inscriptions. We get a lot of reference to the temple construction. The Pattiprolu casket relief inscription, already we saw earlier about this particular Pattiprolu inscription. It refers to the creation of religious structures and how different groups were coming to this part of India, and it also refers to Nigamas and Goshtis as pilgrims from northwestern part of India. So it reveals the multiple dimensions of religious life, how different structures, different temples were constructed. So that particular aspect can be gleaned from the inscription related to cultural history. This is the Pattiprolu casket relief inscription, which is now preserved in Madras Museum. Coming to the temple construction, we have a lot of references across India for the construction of temples, Buddhist subhas, and donation made to the Chaityas. Here we have this Heliodorus pillar inscription. It was another important monument in northern India. This person was sent to the court of King Bhagabhadra by Andialcidas, the Greek king of Taxila. The kingdom of Taxila was part of the Bactrian region in northwestern India. It was conquered by Alexander the Great in 325 BC. This particular column has an inscription which mentions the Garuda column of Vasudeva, the god of gods, was erected by Heliodorus, a worshipper of Vishnu, the son of Dion, an inhabitant of Taxila, who came as a Greek ambassador from the great king Andialcidas. So this particular inscription tells us how even the Greeks were influenced by Indian cults and Indian tradition. This is the Heliodorus pillar inscription. You can see the pillar and its capital. This is the inscription. This is a image from Gangaikonda Cholapuram Bragadishwara temple built by Rajendra I. This has a beautiful sculpture. It has a lot of inscriptions which talk about the donation made to the temple. The temples have a lot of inscription. They give in detail about the donation for particular image, donation for lighting a lamp, donation for various other pujas in the temples. We also have certain inscriptions related to music. This particular inscription from Kudumiyanmalai is very important. It dates to 7th century and it gives a very detailed account of the music notation, and it mentions it was composed by the king who is a great devotee of Maheshwara and who is disciple of Rudracharya for the benefit of learners and students of music. So music is also reflected in the inscription. This is one important aspect of our cultural life. The temples were always associated with music and singing, and we get indirect reference to these music through the reference in the inscription. For example, the Tanjavur temple inscription refers to the lot of temple workers called Talicheri Pendugal, and also it mentions about various musicians and their salary given to them by the king Rajaraja. And the Kudumiyan Malay inscription, it refers to various musical ragas like Madhyama Grama, Sajjagrama, Sadhava, Sadarita, Panchama, Kaishika Madhyama, Kaishika. These are all listed and the notation is given. Another important aspect we can understand from the inscription is the food culture, which is often ignored in cultural history. The inscription gives a lot of information on the food culture, like they mention about Kari Amudu. Curry actually refers to pepper, Parupamudu, dal rice, and a lot of other food items are mentioned as mainly given to the Lord as offering. And for example, the Tirumala inscription of Vijayanagara period dated to 1517 records about dosa. For one dosai padi, it refers the ingredients. Actually, we can really recreate, actually work on these detailed research on these traditional food items and food practices. It mentions for one dosai padi as an offering to the god, it required one marakal of rice, three nadi of black gram, one urakku and one arakku of ghee, 5 palam of refined sugar. Nowadays we make dosa without sweet. Also people make sweet dosa. This particular recipe is very interesting. This is just one piece of information. We get a lot of information with related to various kind of foods and also their proportion. Suppose if you want to make food, how much of rice, how much of dal, how much of pepper. That is an interesting information that we get from these inscription. And also another important cultural aspect related to the inscription is the poems and literary styles. And the poems also had an impact. People were composing poems from an early period, and then people were also incorporating these poetic styles in the inscription. The Aigole inscription praised the Chalukya family as the birthplace of jewels of men who were ornaments to the diadem on the earth. These are certain poetic inscriptions that we are finding. The 5th century Mandaswara inscription described the city of Dasapur as a forehead marked tilaka on the earth adorned with mountains and decorated with earrings in the form of flower-laden trees. A 5th century inscription of Avalikara king Visavarman describes wells and tanks, divine residences and audiences, halls, pleasure gardens and pools as decoration or ornaments to the city. So we do get these kind of poetic expression which help us to understand the aesthetic sense of the people as part of cultural history. Then we also get a lot of sin or curse for damaging or for disturbing a dana or dharma. The inscription often refer to that if you disturb this dharma, you will incur the sin equivalent to killing of a cow on the bank of Ganga. There is another reference in a Vijayanagara inscription, whoever seizes the land endowed either by himself or by other will be reborn as worms for 60,000 years. There is another inscription which mentions he will miss the worship of Vithala and would acquire the sin of killing a cow, murdering a Brahmin. So we get these cultural ideas in these inscriptions. They help us to understand the mindset of the people and their cognition and their thinking. So coming to the summary, what I have listed is very little, and the social, cultural and economic history is actually a vast area, and one can really go through the inscription, cull out information not only about socio-economical political history but also about environmental history, history of science and intellectual history. Especially the way people calculated time and chronometry. We have so much of information that has not been researched yet properly. Therefore, I hope you understand the main points that I highlighted in relation to the use of epigraphy for understanding social, economic and cultural history. If you have any doubt, you may please consult the e-text, and I also request you to log on to EPG Pathshala if you have more queries. Thank you.